So we're here to solve this Battleships puzzle by Ashish Kumar with a 2020 to 2021 theme, and there are a lot of 21s in the grid. Actually, both of the right side clues in this bottom clue are 2021s, and the C's in the middle of the grid are a 2 and 1 also for the last 2 digits of the year. This is a pretty quintessential Battleship puzzle in terms of how it solves, and one of the things I guess we should do at the start is talk about the pen-pal interface for Battleship. When you click into this grid, we defaulted everyone to composite, and then in object placement, this first option of Battleship, and in that space, a single click is a square, a second click, if not near a square, is a submarine shape, but if you do a second click near a square, you'll end up making something that's rounded back towards any square it's adjoined to. This is obviously not a valid ship look with the plus shape, but it's how the clicking only interface will go with this Battleship, and you can get to where a click and drag will be your zeros if you want to do that. I'm going to solve in this tutorial video in a different way, and what I want to have is a little bit of an ability to shade given cells in a color. So I want surface to be on, and then in shape under special under Battleship is another place to get Battleship clue pieces where a 1 is a submarine, a 2 is a square, and coming through you get the directions, and then finally the C's. And so I'm going to have in my tab options surface on and shape on. And in doing that, I'm going to be able to quickly go back and forth from highlighting the grid for you to entering particular kinds of ship sections. So maybe not the most natural way for solvers to start, but just to give you a sense of one of the ways you can customize the tool to solve the ways you want to go. Having customized the tool, I'm going to do a slower step by a lot of keyboard clicks, and apologies for the noise of the keyboard. We'll learn how to minimize that in the future. But for now, I'm going to do something that I used to in the back of the car rides when I was solving Battleships and Games magazine, would just gladly do with pencil. You just like stroke through all the zeros. And the very first thing you'll do in any Battleships puzzles is divide the grid where you know there are no ship sections. If there are any given zeros, those are very powerful clues because no ships go in them. It's a pretty obvious deduction. At the start, what it really does is divides the grid into these more limited spaces where you can now intercept one of the key heuristics, one of the starting points for 80+% of Battleship puzzles, not all of them, but many of them, which is to ask the question, where is the Battleship? And a Battleship needs to have 4 consecutive cells that get filled by it. And something unique to this puzzle is that a lot of the given rows and given columns are fairly low numbers. So actually, none of the given rows or columns can have a Battleship. It's actually the case that they also can't even have the 3-unit cruisers in them. And so we're going to, at the start of this puzzle, think about how do we place a Battleship in either these rows, the 5th row or 10th row marked in red, or the 5th or 10th columns marked in blue. You don't have to know this for this puzzle solve, but there are 20 total ship sections in a full fleet. And so the red cells will have to add up to 10 because there are only 10 clued ship sections in the other rows, and the 2 blue cells will add up to 11. We're not going to use that thinking, but it's something to keep in mind as you work through these puzzle styles. For the start, though, I'm just going to say where can the Battleships go, and the Battleships can go in the 2 vertical columns in these 2 positions. There's nothing in the lower part of the grid because of this 0 over here, or the 0 above, that's given a 4 wide place. And if you look about the rows, there are no rows that allow for Battleship at all. So for sure, the Battleship is in one of these 2 options that is vertical. And note, intriguingly, that whichever Battleship it is, it's going to complete the look of that row. And so you can mark. It's not required for this medium weak difficulty puzzle, but a step you should try to do if you're doing this conceptualization is recognize when you have these either or options, they still effectively put in the cell the ship section that's going to complete out that space. And so the Battleship going above and filling that place is actually going to help us as we think about the cruisers to say, could we actually put a cruiser in these 3 cells or in these 3 cells? And the answer is no, because the Battleship is going to take that spot and the cruiser cell will be effectively eliminated. The other cell in these spaces will be a C cell. So let's think where else the cruisers can go, and they have to be in the colored rows, which could allow for 3. So a cruiser could be in these 3 cells. The cruisers can go vertically here and can go vertically here, and as we just described, they can't go up top where the Battleship is going to go, the 4-unit Battleship. And so we've got 3 potential spaces to place 2 ships. That means for sure that one of the ship sections is in this corner, And it also means for sure that one of the ships is in the other place. You can't have two ships collide into each other. That'd be a very bad way to organize your fleet. It would lead to certain loss of whatever conflict you might be in. And so this cruiser is vertical. That being vertical actually has a neat deduction here in the same way the cell above was limiting a battleship, so we could only have one vertical battleship. We can only have one vertical cruiser, and for sure we actually have these placements for the cruisers. This cell I just marked in the 9th column finishes out that column, so we can color this up and can then work from here in two ways. Sometimes when you're going from largest ship to smallest ship, we can go to the 2-unit ships, but we might as well here just come back and say, can we answer now where the battleship goes for sure? And the only battleship option that really has information around it is the one on the left, because it would still lead to eliminating more cells right nearby. And a thing to think about in all these puzzles is where is the placement of a ship going to eliminate C's right next to it. And so if a battleship were in the space that it started with, it would actually eliminate 3 of the remaining 4 cells and make it impossible to put 2 ship sections into this 6th column. And so the only place that will leave enough room to fill in the rest of the grid is the rightmost option. And so, there wasn't much information on the right side because everything else was C's around it, so it'd be fine or completely, innocuous to go there. But a large battleship vertical in this space would cause issues, and so that is one of the ways we can think through at this stage the next step in the puzzle. We then will come back to the kind of thinking that you'll do is we've placed the 4-unit and 3-unit ships. Let's now get to the destroyers. There are 3 of them. Where could any of the destroyers go? And we'll start with the horizontal placements. A destroyer could be here. Given we've now placed one of the ship sections in this row, a destroyer cannot go here because there's only one more ship section to place in this space. It also can't go here because of the same issue with the battleship on the right, but it could go into this option. So these are the only 2 options I see left in this grid with all the C's marked as we've been going along that can have a horizontal destroyer. And looking vertically, there is this option in the 1st column. There is this option in the 5th column, which has some number of ships. We have no idea how many. There is a potential option right here. But all 3 of these really collide together. And so somewhere in this orange square, this big square, is one of the destroyers. But while there's not as much maybe to know about those, for sure, 2 of the 2-unit ships are in the 1st row and in the 1st column, which fully completes those spaces. But also, if you now look at the 6th row, the 2 ship sections that should go into there are also now placed. And so we're left with just one option in this original space for the 3rd destroyer, which is right there. We've got only the 4 submarines to place, and there's one column, this 8th column, that has 2 cells remaining and must be filled in to get 2 ships in them. We now actually have 4 empty cells remaining, 2 in this column, which will take 2 of the subs, and 1 over here, which will have to take 1 of the subs. And that leaves behind just these 2 last options, and we finish this puzzle. Now, it's not the case every battleship solves from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, but this is a quintessential puzzle where solving 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 is absolutely how to go. It starts by recognizing that there are really 2 important rows and 2 important columns where the big ships can go. 2 options for the battleship in green. There were 3 options for the cruisers in pink, eventually 5 options for destroyers in orange, but a lot of those options were intersecting the same spaces, and so thinking through those, there were always a unique ship to be placed, and in doing that, you could get your way all the way through to the end of the grid. So hopefully you learn a little bit about how to play with the PenPa edit interface, as well as how to think about Battleships puzzles, and we'll see you again soon.